And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Tuesday. And today we get to celebrate 1 year of DMT, man. What a crazy run. I remember having these guys on my podcast when I still did my individual one, Jake Allen's guest list, talking about just the idea of DMT. I think that was like 3 or 4 months before it was even implemented. So really exciting times as we enter the peak bull run and this mania. If you guys want to invite, Adam, if you can invite Iman up as well to make sure that you can come up and speak, that would be cool. Chris, how are we feeling today?
Feeling good, man. Always a stressful time. Just so much going on. It's like hard to breathe. It's hard to think, but we're sitting pretty nice. How are we feeling, boys? What's it like?
Bro, so bullish right now. I know, number up, number down, but the time, I mean, we're in bull run, man. This is pre-Trump euphoria, I think people are feeling right now. And So yeah, you got to feel good now, even if your particular bag isn't up or down. There's a lot of bullishness in the air for sure.
Yeah. Right as we opened up this space, we just got an appointment for the Treasury Secretary for the United States, who is apparently a very big crypto bull. I need to find his name on here. I just saw it as we had opened the space up. So probably going to see some more mania, some more excitement as we go through this call. As we,
I saw it. I don't know if you saw it, but like Elon put out a thing. It's like, hey, we should abolish the IRS and stuff. Like, all the ideas are floating, which is like, actually, it was a great video. I encourage you guys to check it out. But yeah, Elon retweeted it, and it's like, dude, the amount spent by and you all know it, dude. How many hours? You at least have to carve out a day of your life every year to do your taxes. It's at least a day. And I mean, the amount of hours and waste, they estimated at like nearly $600 billion every year just on tax preparation for the American public. It's retarded. And so these ideas that have been like kind of on the down low are finally like surfacing. Like, why are we doing this? Let's just do it in an easier, faster way. And the one thing about like Costa Rica, I'll give it as an example, like there's nobody fills out a personal tax return here, dude. It's like, it's all done by the businesses, just like with Social Security stuff. Bro, it just frees people. You don't have to, your taxes are taken out good, but you don't deal with it, dude. Huge relief if something like that ever passed.
Yeah, I got one final thing and then we'll move into the conversation. So yesterday I was hanging out with one of my friends who I worked at the nightclub with back in the day, and she's a server, and she's telling me about how everyone in the nightclub space is talking about Solana, to be honest. And I'm sitting there, and she's just asking me about coins and what to buy and stuff like that. And so I'm giving her, some like speculative plays, and it just reminded me of like how complicated crypto is. I was giving her, some simple things to like buy on Uniswap or to buy on Radium, and she's like, I'm only going to buy this stuff if it's on Coinbase because I just want to be able to click the button. So I showed her Bonk, and she was like, ooh, I like this. And I was like, it's up like 200%. She's like, I don't care. I could just buy it on Coinbase and I have to deal with it. And it just makes me realize like that simplicity is so important as we move into this bull run, and that market caps probably don't matter at that point.
It's super interesting. I saw somebody else posted about, unit bias mattering too, which I thought was actually on point as well. Where people don't know, whatever Bonk, I bought for $1,000, I bought 50 million Bonk or whatever. People love that sort of stuff. And so just pay attention to it. I mean, it's definitely something that coming into the normies, coming into the space, ease of access and that sort of thing, number bias could definitely play a huge role in what
Yes, absolutely. So for those that are new to the space, I did pin the live stream and the spaces. We are talking through my account because we do have a live audience who watches this on a Twitter video and YouTube as well. So if you could give one of those two a retweet so that everyone could come in and learn about DMT and celebrate the 1 year, then we'll get on to the space. So without further ado, what's up, gentlemen? Who do we have behind the Block Runner account?
Hey guys, this is Will.
Good.
Appreciate Adam, Jake, and Chris for having us. Yeah, it's been a year. It's been a year since the DMT trip, and we're still on it. We're still kind of pushing the whole thing, and it keeps expanding. So I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, man. We love our nerdy stuff here, to be honest. We're also, Adam and I come from the historical NFT space where we spent pretty much the entire NFT cycle debating, a lot of the things of like what's provenance and the meaning of a token and right, arbitrary and not and stuff. And, sometimes it gets lost in the fluff of the mania of tokens going up, but it builds a devout community for better or for worse, because it is some tensions that foil over the definition of different types of things. But let's go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in and say is like, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the idea of a non-arbitrary token doesn't automatically mean that arbitrary tokens are bad or anything, or somehow worse. It's just that when you look at Bitcoin and you look at its current momentum, the energy that Bitcoin is sort of undertaking it really lends to a lot of these like physical properties, right? And this whole theory is just about leveraging and harnessing a blockchain layer that is the hardest and most bulletproof database that we've ever seen. And so if we could just harness that and leverage that property for in the form of a token, it's like let's see what happens. And so far the experiment has been working.
Yeah, man, you guys have got a lot of traction. I see people consistently bull posting DMT. Could you just give us, just a simple definition for those who are maybe new to this? Is what exactly is DMT?
Yeah. So this is a question that we get often, and we're always trying to refine what it is. And ultimately, it boils down to leveraging Bitcoin block data to generate tokens. And so, what does that mean? That means that the supply of a token is a non-arbitrary value. It means that these tokens will continue to generate as long as Bitcoin continues to add blocks. And ultimately, it's a new form of a creation tool for creators building any in the spectrum of a game all the way down to like a DeFi product. And so everything that we've seen so far in crypto in sort of the arbitrary world, just to put it, you could do using DMT tokens, and then you leverage these inherent properties of Bitcoin, such as, let's say, if you point to the subsidy of Bitcoin, right? It halves every 4 years. So your token that points to that specific field on Bitcoin, now your token halves every 4 years. And so what does that mean for your DeFi ecosystem? What does that mean for the metaverse? Right. And so you can leverage a lot of these properties that is being supported by this huge energy network. And ultimately it's just a new form of creation that is dependent on the security of Bitcoin. And one of the updates that we're looking to make here in the near future is directing the first DMT token, which is called NAT, directing that token, which continues to inflate every single block, directing it to the miners. And so once the subsidy ends in 2140, now you have a second subsidy token that potentially at least somewhat supports the Bitcoin mining network and increases the security of Bitcoin. So that's kind of like in our mind share at the moment, but yeah, hopefully that sort of gives you a ground level view as to what's been happening over the last year.
Yeah. So let's say I'm an individual and I want to create a DMT token, right? So as I understand it, or to just explain it simply, you're just looking for a data set within Bitcoin's history, or I guess on chain, that has some sort of pattern, which then you basically set that rule set and allow people to freely mint these tokens based off of the data set that is embedded into this token, whichever DMT token you're creating.
That's right. Yeah, and through Tap protocol, we're able to add a little bit more flexibility. So typically, we're all used to like free and fair mints, which has its place, right? It's pretty valuable. All right, that's how you get like 10,000x. We've seen that with Natcats. But the flexibility that Tap gives us is through privilege authority. And so you could launch a token, a PFP project that you set a price and you could sell those assets at a given price. And so there's no worry about sniping or mempool competitions or anything like that. So yeah, Tap protocol allows us to program this a little bit more how you would want, right? For supporting creators, supporting the metaverse, things like that. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of like a new tool that we get to leverage and see where it takes us. And this narrative, everything in crypto is about narrative. So I think this is a pretty strong one.
Yeah, absolutely. I have here pulled up on the live stream where on Ordinal's wallet, we're looking at the top Tap token, which is actually the DMT token. It has 8,000 owners. That's a supply of 26,000, over 311 Bitcoin in total volume, so 28 million. Just as, to set an example, what is the data set for DMT NAT? Like, how was that created? And to just make people understand what the top DMT token is.
Yeah, so when we were on your show a while back, I think this was over a year ago, we were talking about the concept of DMT. And really, we talked about it conceptually only because we knew it was possible to a certain extent, but we didn't necessarily want to be the ones to kind of like put it out there. So when we were putting together the Git book, we were like, okay, we can release this Git book, but nobody's going to care unless we launch a token. So we decided to launch the first token. It was called NAT. And we had to decide which particular data field made sense. And we looked into the block data. It has essentially 39 or 30 different fields, and we discovered the bits field. And so the bits field is just a numerical representation of difficulty of Bitcoin. So that means that when hash power goes up, the numerical value of the bits field goes down. And then we looked at the first block to the last block, and we compared the two numbers, and they were roughly the same number. It was like 480 million to 400 million tokens per block, right? From the first block to the last block. So we're like, okay, let's just launch this token based off of the bits field, and then let's just put it out there and see if people are even interested in this concept. And once we did, November 20th, 2023, to our surprise, it blocked out in 7 days. And this is sort of a big deal in the sense is that we had to have people inscribe a JSON into Bitcoin, and they had to inscribe a JSON that didn't already exist. And the only difference between one JSON structure and another one was the block number. And so, yeah, to our surprise, it blocked out in 7 days. And now we're wanting to direct this NAT token to the miners, because right now it's being botted, right? But if we direct it to the miners, and this relationship of the security of Bitcoin going up or hash power going up, and then the number of NAT tokens going down with this inverse relationship, we think it's a pretty powerful tokenomics to kind of support the security of Bitcoin indefinitely.
How would you direct it to the miners? What does that entail?
Yeah, so another good question. So right now, to deploy a token, it's about like $1.50. Maybe today is like $2.50 or something like that. So and to deploy a token, it's a deployment JSON, right? And the JSON is says token deploy. And so right now it's just a bot is minting the latest block. So a new block forms, they inject their inscription into that block, and hopefully they pay more than the next guy, and bot activity. And so the question is, how do you direct this protocol or this meta protocol or this particular token to the miners? And so ultimately the TAP ecosystem, the BRC20 ecosystem, they're based off of an account-based system. So that means that with BRC20s and TAPs, when you inscribe a transfer inscription, all you're doing is you're sending a signal to the blockchain so that an indexer can say, okay, Adam is trying to move these tokens, and as soon as this transfer inscription hits the new wallet, that guy is going to add that amount of tokens to his wallet. So it's account based. This is different than a UTXO based, where 1 million tokens in this UTXO is sent to Adam. Adam can send that same UTXO to me, and then I receive the same million assets. And so now what we're doing is, instead of allowing bots to just mine all these like future blocks, we'll say whoever wins the Bitcoin reward or whoever wins the next block is the miner that receives that same amount of NAT tokens. And so it's simply an update to the meta protocol at the indexer level.
Yeah, very, very, very fascinating. So, moving into a little bit more of this infrastructure that you guys have built, you guys came into the Bitcoin ordinal space pretty early. You're large fans of a bitmap. And so this idea was kind of derived from there. But then you guys created something new that was kind of in the ethos of what was happening in the ordinal space at the time. This idea of like decentralized mints, right? Or free and fair, which seems to capture a lot of the narrative in the space. And you guys introduced something on Mscribe, which is basically your, bitmap and DMT marketplace, something called block drops. Could you describe what that is and why the community has decided to kind of, champion this type of minting?
Yeah, so a block drop is actually pretty interesting in how it works. It's very similar to the idea of an airdrop. I mean, similar words or similar names. But the whole point of a block drop is if you're holding a specific DMT asset, let's say like a NatCat, and someone in the community, could be the creator of the NatCat, could be just some random person in the community, decides to do a block drop. They can block drop another PFP project, an asset for the metaverse. It could be a fungible token, doesn't matter. But point is, they did a block drop. So what that means is that if that block drop is essentially can be inscribed via a parent-child transaction. So that means that 100 years from now, if your NatCat hasn't had that inscription inscribed out of it as a child, that means the person holding it 100 years from now can inscribe it using parent-child to extract that asset out of that particular parent inscription. And so this means that when NatCats occur again in 100 years, because that particular block pattern occurs again, that future NatCat will also have the block drop. And so block drops is just an alignment mechanism that aligns production of assets to Bitcoin. And it's future facing too, right? And so bitmaps are going to be produced, after we die. And so those bitmaps that have block drops in the future people should be able to inscribe those assets even after we're gone. And so we just think that this method is a little bit more aligned with Bitcoin and long term more sustainable.
So I pulled up on the live stream. I have opened up DMT Bitminer, and you see something typical to how Bitmap was minted out, where it just showcases basically blocks. For Bitmap, it was just block 1 through 800,000 or 880,000. Here on this one, DMT Bitminer, you see the first one it starts at is 99, then 199, then 299, 399, so on and so forth. And these ones are purple, whereas I'm assuming, as you get further down, there's ones that are available and reserved. So from my understanding, based off of this pattern, right, it's whatever ends in 9999, those are available immediately. And then anytime a new block, right, once it gets down to 880,000 or 858,499 and then 599,000, those will appear on the block drop as that block is mined. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the Bitminer is actually pretty interesting because they're the first to leverage field 4 in this particular methodology. So what that means is this particular pattern 99, this occurs roughly once a day, right? So in a given day, there's 144 blocks of Bitcoin. The block number that ends with 99 occurs at roughly once a day. So what's cool about that is if you go look at Ethereum and you look at the Nouns project, they did an arbitrary sort of creation called the Nouns project, and it just occurs once a day, and it's pretty valuable. I mean, right now the latest Nouns are going for around 2 ETH, and it's a giant auction. But ultimately, it's like a Bitminer produces once a day, and it's a little bit more scalable in the context of the metaverse, and anyone can sort of wait for that asset to occur again and inscribe it, deploy it on a bitmap, start mining tokens. So it's been kind of an interesting experiment in regards to supporting the metaverse on Bitcoin.
How are you guys thinking about, obviously, bots, just as like a general overall community? How are you guys thinking about it? Because I mean, there's really no way to doesn't seem like there's a good way to prevent it, right? And miners, we know the miners, they're always looking for extra income, right? What kind of would stop them from just botting anything like this that they think would have any value?
Yeah, when it comes to bots, I don't think there's a good method to prevent that, other than making adjustments to the meta protocol in the sense of directing the NAT tokens to the miners, things like that. The NAT redirection to the miners it makes sense from like a tokenomics perspective. It has over 20,000 holders on Bitcoin. And so it already has like an established user base or holder count. And so if we can sort of harness this narrative, directing it to the miners, it seems like a reasonable like tokenomic update, right?
But what
So
about,
so
I'm
when it
not
comes
talking necessarily about that. What about the like upcoming or next ones or whatever, people might be interested in
sure.
what about that, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
just
no, for sure. And so this redirection to the miners, it will be a feature of like the DMT ecosystem. So if you want to deploy something that has future implications, meaning it comes, your deployment comes, every block or every 100 blocks or whatever, you can decide to direct future blocks to the miners if potentially there's a block out, right? So for the future, it's like really you can't really stop bots. So it's sort of like just mitigating this activity with like design updates and things like that. So there's not a whole lot you can do. And some might look at bots and see like a bullish narrative, and it could be. But right now, like for example, bitmaps, they're being botted too, and I think they're being botted by a miner through selfish mining. So
yeah.
there's not even a way for any of us to compete, right? The miners just always win. So I mean that's presents a problem. If depends on how you look at it, really.
Interesting. So moving into, the projects or people who might be using this, is it mostly people from the bitmap community coming in and creating digital items for their bitmap, like, right, like a chair, or they're creating a bit miner, I guess, in this perspective, or is it kind of still in the experimentation phase and people are still trying to figure out what type of assets are being created from this?
Yeah, I think it's everyone's involved, right? So there's a lot of people in the bitmap community creating content that can be deployable on a bitmap, like a bit miner. But really, DMT has attracted a bunch of creators and developers who are not necessarily well accustomed to like the concept of a metaverse. Like in the case of EV, who created Natcats, he just really enjoyed the concept of DMT, and he wanted to, make something using it. And so he essentially front ran us on the design of supporting like these unique non-arbitrary tokens, these UNATs. And so, once he put that script on chain and it sort of made sense for other creators to kind of like go down that path and create their own projects. But DMT has really attracted all forms of people, not just like metaverse focused audience.
Got it. So I have here opened up on the live stream. Natcats, the market cap is 10 million, sitting at a 0.01 Bitcoin floor. Obviously, these are right NFTs, kind of PFPs, probably could be used as a cat in the metaverse. And then on the other side of it, you have DMT, NAT that we covered, which is kind of the fungible token side. So really still kind of in this experimentation phase. But, as the creator, or both of you as the creator, where do you suspect this is going to funnel into? Do you think it's going to be this kind of wide array of an experimentation where it's more fungible, or it's kind of fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens? Do you think it'll be mostly used for quote unquote NFTs of the metaverse, or are you guys like just kind of wide open and have no idea really where this is going to go, and you're kind of just championing that?
Well, we really don't know where this is going to go. I mean, when we were designing this idea, this concept in this Git book, we were really focused on fungible tokens. And I think it was probably because we didn't have to create a script and do art, and we're not like art bros, right? And so we were really focused on the fungible side of things. And it wasn't until Evie created Natcats, it was like, wait a minute, it's like this is where the action is, and so we need to focus on this side of things. And then on top of that, everyone knows in Bitcoin, like there's not a whole lot of infrastructure, and we really have to, depend on, bridging to other chains, things like that. So it's not ideal in the ethos of Bitcoin. It's like you come to Bitcoin to build, and all of a sudden you're bridging out. Like, doesn't make all that sense. But those bridges do bring audience from other chains to Bitcoin. So from that perspective, it does make sense. But ultimately, it's like we need to support whatever gets traction. And the first thing that got traction was essentially these UNATs. And then now we're starting to focus on NAT and sort of allowing that to be the beachhead in the introduction of DMT to new audiences. And I feel like even though the concept of DMT is a little bit hard to understand at first glance, I think looking at the NAT token, understanding why the supply is 358 trillion, like why is this particular that supply is like, oh, because it's non-arbitrary, it's pointing to specific data field on Bitcoin, and then it sort of like begins the wheels in motion, right? And so now you start to gain momentum, and if you think about it, it is among one of the more interesting narratives out in crypto, because Iman and I were looking at DeFi, decentralized science, and there's a lot of weird stuff happening over there, and some stuff that doesn't really make sense, like from a sustainable standpoint, but it has traction, right? And so narratives, I think, is what drives audiences to partake, and I think this is like one of the more interesting ones.
Yeah, and just kind of piggyback on that, another emerging trend that I know you guys are aware of is this whole AI agent phenomena that's starting to kind of permeate everywhere. It's still in its infancy, but people are just now starting to grasp, I think, I don't know what it can like balloon into, given just a couple of additional, I guess, injections of new, I guess, whether you call them value narratives or whatever, but DMT has some sort of potential interplay with that, considering, a lot of these AI agents, that they have the ability to have customized inputs as far as, how do they react to whatever data given to them, whether it's a financial decision or some sort of in metaverse action that they're tasked to complete, whatever, like injecting some sort of non-arbitrary cue essentially into that. These algorithms can, in a sense, give these AI agents a little bit more of a sense of lifeness, right? Just there's something beyond just the code determining the output of these AI agents, right? It's Bitcoin, and like Will says, there's a lot of thermodynamic properties to that make it feel like it has an actual like an unbreakable component to it, right? Even though code itself is, it does that, but associating these data components in Bitcoin along with it, I think has a lot of potential, right? So just kind of as the Bitcoin ecosystem continues to get a lot of traction, which I think it's like we're in the beginning stages of that. I think Runes is about to explode pretty soon here. I think that's going to get a lot of traction, just kind of bringing a lot of this meme coin energy into our space. All that's going to trickle throughout all this stuff that we've been building over the last couple of years, right? DMT included, bitmaps, like these are all new, interesting things that can be applied to this already exciting new digital economy that's in the making, right? And give it like basically some new ingredients to play with.
My one kind of recommendation to you guys is like just from the outside looking in, just as like a smooth brain and the way people like look at it, is when you guys start saying like non-arbitrary, like, to be honest, most people don't know what that word means. I'm just letting you know, like, just started using the word non-random or whatever, right? The data is not random. It's dictated by the, Bitcoin blockchain. I think that kind of narrative is actually really cool, especially when you're, like you just pointed, there's so many different kind of use cases for that, where you need kind of non-random data, and how are you going to do it? Is it going to be made up by a dev? Or it could be given out by the Bitcoin blockchain. Which do you prefer, right? That narrative is really cool, right? I just think there's a little bit of a disconnect from what I've heard and people I've talked to about like what that means, and using that kind of terminology, non-arbitrary, just in my view, kind of you kind of lose people. That's just my take on the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're always looking to make it easier to understand. And you're right. I mean, all these like figures, like 21 million, it's just a random number. Like it could have been anything.
Yep.
And so, yeah, if we can figure out ways to sort of make it easier to understand that when you launch a token, like if you look at any other fungible standard out there, you got to put in a supply, right? And in some cases, you have to put in an inflationary supply if it's not, static. And so it's like humans have to put in that number. It's like, well, why not just find a pattern and use that pattern's occurrence as the supply? It's like, why not do that? And then the fact that it's Bitcoin, like it just makes a ton of sense. But yeah, ultimately you're right. It's like Yeah, if you have more suggestions, just definitely let us know, because we're always trying to like optimize this narrative.
We have this conversation at Emblem all the time because you'd say DMT and Emblem are similar, that they're both protocols that are one of one, right? There's nothing else in the industry that's comparable to these. And so for us, it's always trying to simplify it down to, the common denominator of how to explain it. I do like the non-random is a little bit easier. One thing, going back to the previous conversation, the AI agent crossover is kind of interesting, where you can just have build an AI agent to basically identify all of the possible patterns, or you have them say, hey, what are these common patterns, and what probably could have the biggest impact based off of Twitter sentiment or Twitter data or something like that. But one thing that I look for like to see if it's going to be a mega trend or not is to see if that I guess you say that narrative or that kind of like emerging market is proliferating on other chains. So like when you look at, this cycle alone, ordinals was the first one to the scene. And now you have ordinals on, right, Dogecoin and Litecoin and Ethereum. And also, if you remember, it was attempted on pretty much every chain. It was breaking L2s. And then you had meme coins come shortly after. And now that's like the main narrative of the cycle. To me, it seems like AI agents are probably that third, because you're seeing it on all these other chains. But DMT also had this kind of era where they tried it on Dogecoin. And so my leading question is like, how tough would it be to implement something like DMT on these other chains? We did mention that there is a little bit of a technical hurdle. I do know that Tap is now expanding to Doge as well. But, as you guys are the creators of it, like what is the technical lift for others to try to do this on, like Ethereum or Solana, et cetera?
Well, when we think about Bitcoin, it is sort of a universal asset. And if you go deep into our podcast, we essentially regard Bitcoin into this like digital physics realm, and I know that's not conducive for like anyone to understand like exactly what that means, but when I say physics, it's the laws of physics that apply to everybody. Like you cannot just break these laws, right? And so when you look at it, Bitcoin's like, maybe we can create this substrate layer and make it accessible to other chains, because Ethereum, Solana, they've been around for years and they have infrastructure. So why not take the substrate layer of Bitcoin and the idea of generating assets from Bitcoin, but these are ERC 721s or these are ERC 20s. Like why not? Why can't we do that? And why not leverage this physics layer, this digital physics layer on other chains? And that to us makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, you can use Ethereum's blockchain and Doge's blockchain and all these other blockchains and really tie the manifestation of tokens based off these other blockchains, but it doesn't have the same gravitas and gravity that Bitcoin does. And so why not export this substrate layer to other chains so that the Ethereum bros can create new DeFi products, right? Add to this like new narrative. And Solana can create, these crazy memes that are, non-random, right? And so that's what kind of how we're thinking about exporting this to other chains. But yeah, I mean, anyone can do pretty much, what they want. But I feel like leveraging Bitcoin in every case makes the most sense.
Yeah, we do see some things like that, where I think there's a project on Base to where you can go long or short on Bitcoin fees. And one of the reasons that I ask is, every blockchain kind of has its own culture. So to see people taking this idea and trying to, do this with block data on Solana or on Ethereum, I think it's basically free marketing, because what happens generally is that these kind of ideas take off, and it always circles back to, who was the first one to do this and kind of where the helm is. So allowing others to basically take the idea and experiment with their own community, I don't think it takes away from the initial DMT. It only allows the idea to trickle throughout the entire industry, to then lead back to kind of the home or the mothership of Bitcoin and this kind of idea.
100%.
I do like the idea that I didn't even think about the idea that you explained, though, of basically taking the data and then using Solana and Ethereum as the token layer. It's also pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you guys remember a year ago, I would say a little bit over a year ago, there was another pandemic, right? The inscription pandemic hit almost every chain. And a lot of the transactions and a lot of the volume and a lot of the action was as a result of applying inscription concept to other chains. And of course that didn't really last all that much like long or anything, just because it's Bitcoin, and it originated on Bitcoin, and it all comes essentially back to Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, I do agree. I think there needs to be additional experimentation on other chains, however way they see DMT. But I think applying the Bitcoin substrate layer to a different blockchain that has a ton of infrastructure makes a lot of sense, because you could do a lot more, a lot faster, just because the infrastructure is there.
Yeah, and I I kind of want to add on to the idea of each chain having their own culture, essentially their own way of doing things, or something unique to their chain that gives them some sort of standout narrative amongst like this super competitive ecosystem. All the other chains, Solana, obviously it's very degen friendly. A lot of the, I guess, memes originate from that ecosystem. Ethereum has like their DeFi vibes, and I guess now like DeFi is starting to emerge from within there. But so far, we've only identified DMT as the only like unique creation to come out of the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I think it makes a lot of sense to really nurture this idea within the culture of Bitcoin itself, and like this is how we interpret how things should be done, and why there's like a unique value proposition to building things on Bitcoin, because all these other chains, like we're saying, it can be done, but their chains don't have the unique properties that Bitcoin does to contribute to the intrinsic value of these non-arbitrary assets that are being produced on Bitcoin, right? We could create like essentially a I don't know, some sort of middle layer or some way so these other chains can essentially leverage that. But again, it doesn't have the same impact and feel as they're being produced on layer one, directly from the blocks. And I think that's really what's important, partly our focus. But of course, these tools are open source, so I wouldn't be surprised to see at some point in the future someone on Solana could potentially deploy like a pump.dmt or something like that, and just directly trying to launch meme coins off of patterns that have been identified once more fields are activated, right? Specifically around the transaction field, because there's a ton of potential, a lot of archaeology and discovery that can be had there. So that seems kind of fun in itself, right? Something new that this meme demographic hasn't really played into, right? And I'm just personally trying to understand the meme market myself, like because it's something we've largely kind of faded over the last couple of years, but we're starting to, obviously, it's non-debatable. This is the wave, right? This is the tidal wave that's taken over crypto. But I'm trying to understand like what it is that gets this demographic moving, and because a lot of what we've done specifically around our block pad mints and stuff on Mscribe is we've added new layers of friction, especially to like minting things, and it's not really intuitive. Things that you should be building, that doesn't fit within the current market of meme degeneracy, right? You kind of want to reduce friction as much as possible, the way Pump.Fun did, where you're literally deploying things like a couple of fields and a click of a button, you got yourself a token that essentially, you don't have to deal with any technical understanding of anything, yada, 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 right? That seems to be where things are going. But yeah, just wondering, how sustainable is that? Will this demographic eventually start to seek out new opportunities of, I don't know, being engaged with something that they've never experienced before, whether that's discovering new elements on Bitcoin or maybe some sort of in-metaverse activity that still produces the same end result, right? Like I'm still part of a token economy that has the same degenerate potential in a sense, right? Like
Yeah, we were on a
questioning that.
We were on a website. We were looking at this drug, not like a typical like recreational drug. I'm talking about like medicine. And in this Solana project, they were showing these like bugs, right? And these bugs were with enough time they were dying based off some sort of input or whatever is happening. The point is that they're leveraging this narrative of science and drugs and medicine and research, and like that's the narrative. And so what Iman's talking about is like, why not leverage this digital matter theory as like another narrative in a DMT pump fun kind of way. And so I think that's extremely viable and a pretty like untapped sector from like the degen perspective that could be tapped into from Solana, really.
But I mean, well, the trading though and everything is very similar to ordinals, correct? Though everything is relatively slow, kind of like with ordinals.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we had one question in the comments. Was Spirit said, which DMT collections actually secure the art imagery on the Bitcoin blockchain to provide verifiable provenance? So he's asking about, I guess maybe when you're whatever, minting a NanCat or whatever, for example, what does that process look like?
Yeah, so a lot of the artists, they create a script and it's in HTML, JavaScript, P5.js, things like that. So these scripts, they're just text, right? And that text is injected into Bitcoin as an inscription. And when you deploy in our project, in that deployment JSON, you essentially point to the inscription ID of that script. So once it's deployed, depending on if it's free and fair or you're using privileged authority, you can go to mscribe and essentially go to that deployment on mscribe, and you can click on a square and mint that square. And so if they're using privileged authority, typically they tend to use to set a price, right? So whatever price that they set. But if it's open mint, then you just click on a square and you mint it and pay the minting fees, which is about like $1.50, $2, and then you get that asset. And so the way that that's rendered is through recursive rendering. So you basically get your inscription, your mint inscription, and within that mint inscription is the text inside of it is a JSON. And so within that JSON, it points to the deployment. The deployment points to the script, and then we use recursion to actually render the art. And so the whole thing is on chain.
Got it. Interesting. So yeah, so it's not the actual image itself that's inscribed. It's the JSON, which then interprets to the image.
Correct. It's no different than when you go to a website, you're not actually seeing like images.
Yeah, it's not pixel by pixel kind of thing.
Right. It's being rendered, like your browser is rendering code, and then you get a website. And so the UNATs are no different.
It's funny how most people like in real life don't realize that, right? They think that like when we're talking about ordinals and you say, okay, well, the puppet is inscribed on Bitcoin, they think the image is like somehow sitting there on Bitcoin.
Correct.
They literally think that, right? So yeah, there's a little bit lost in translation.
I think puppets are actually fully, I think the image for puppets actually are, but not all of them are.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you can put the images on Bitcoin for sure. Like that's not a problem. It's just you're gonna have to pay for that. And
no,
it's not really
what I'm saying is
conducive.
they don't understand that the image is not like the physical image isn't like imprinted in Bitcoin, right? It's like it's
correct. It's encoded. You're right.
Actually, a lot of people don't get that. They don't actually understand that. That was kind of my point. It's just funny.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is, you guys, I don't know if you guys deal with as much as FUD as we do, but we get that all the time. And it's just people who don't really understand. And so we try to do our best to like explain things, but yeah, I mean, it's not simple to understand like how all this stuff works, how the internet works, how rendering works, and all these details.
What's up, Fitzy?
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for having me on. Great space, great conversation. Love DMT, obviously. I mean, look, this part of the conversation, we're just describing generative art. I mean, that's essentially what we're describing, right? And when it comes to the cost, which again you've just mentioned, we know that that's not going to be as sustainable to put a full JPEG, data heavy items on the chain. So generative art is more dynamic and it's more sustainable and scalable. So that's also going for DMT. I think if we zoomed out. The only thought that I had, because of course Will is Will and I, man, these are the experts on this. But the only sort of thought I had here was DMT has a lot going for it, but the fact that you have in any anything that gets traction and just continues to go and progresses as a space, you find a standard, right? Whether that's a token standard or just a standard of something that people all agree upon. We agree that this is fact, right? Or that this is the best way. And there's a video that I pinned up top earlier, which is for anybody that hasn't watched it. When you frame DMT as the periodic table of digital elements, right? It all just starts to make a bit more sense, because there are only so many patterns. All of them eventually will be found. The ways that they can interact and literally infuse assets with the properties of the very chain itself. Example being, if the bits field goes up and down, then that's what triggers the amount of NAT that's released. So as the security goes up, the bits field number goes down, and that means that less token is generated, right? So you have this regulated token supply. But that's only how one of the, whatever it is, 37, 39 fields work. So if you just visualize, as I do, like an Excel spreadsheet inside every single block, all of those 39 cells are different levers that people will figure out how to use and manipulate. But all the data is agreed upon, because this is the universal truth. Once all of one field has been done, that exists, and no one can say it doesn't, because it's being indexed in a decentralized way through something like the tracker network, for example. But when the whole chain is therefore indexed, this standard, this fully undeniable, bulletproof set of rules for the amount of levers that you can pull and use cases start to appear, that is a smorgasbord of choice and creativity. So you're blending pure Bitcoin, which isn't going anywhere and underpins most of the kind of tech in the future, certainly global financial markets, certainly digital assets, and certainly generative art. I guess I'm saying all that to say it's a word salad, but there's a lot going for DMT. I just think it's a big thing to get off the ground. So this isn't going to just be a one cycle thing. Like DMT, I just have no doubts that this becomes one of the coolest things that you can do on blockchain. And I hadn't had the conversation that you were just having earlier about all these other chains using it as like a, another layer to, leverage the data from Bitcoin, but then produce the tokens on another chain. That's all going to be done. I just am a million more %. These guys are very reserved and very humble, but I just don't believe that DMT just suddenly disappears for all the reasons that I just mentioned. It can literally mirror the physical world, because there can be only a finite amount of this pattern, a finite amount of this pattern, in the same way that oxygen or hydrogen or carbon, right? Like that is the very base layer of digital realities, because they can mirror the very principles of the physical world. Anyway, I'll stop. But as you can tell, I'm a big fan of DMT.
Little bullish.
Yeah. Yeah, Fitzy, I totally agree. I mean, and one underappreciated thing about DMT is that it really forces you to understand Bitcoin. Like the whole bits field, I'm sure most people, when they first heard that we were using the bits field, like didn't know that that was a representation of the difficulty of Bitcoin. And they also didn't know that as the hashing power goes up, the value in the bits field goes down. Like that's why we call these properties, right? They're like these inherent properties that just manifest as a result of the design of Bitcoin. And so, and looking into what other properties exist in Bitcoin, like they're all over the place. And so you can discover these properties by finding these patterns, and the pattern discovery is completely like crowdsourced, right? And so like anybody can do it. So it's like, it's been kind of fun just like learning about Bitcoin and sort of leveraging it.
Fitz, you have a technical question, right? Tap's the that DMT is built on, just from a product standpoint, or I guess from a Tap protocol perspective. How long did it take to build something like this, and how do you guys view it as Tap also expands with different types of I guess features and implementations?
So I think the first thing to clarify is that, of course, DMT, digital matter theory, is just that. It's a theory. It's a framework for the creation of assets in the cool ways that we're kind of describing. Tap doesn't own it.
Right.
Tap is not the only place that can do it. It's protocol agnostic. As we've been describing, it's almost completely chain agnostic. Tap is the first on Bitcoin, and it's the only one. We don't see anybody else that seems to really give a shit, to be honest. And we think that's a mistake, as you can tell. But great for us, because we do see this as a massive, massive trend. We do see this as something that is fundamentally going to change how we view asset creation on Bitcoin. Things are created by Bitcoin. You are literally your co-founder. The thing you're interacting with is Bitcoin. And so if you believe Bitcoin wins, then the fact that you can have something with such a close relationship to it means that theories like this will eventually win, in my opinion. But there was a question there as well, so I want to just clarify that this is not, we don't own it. And we didn't create it. The theory was Will and Iman.
Yeah,
right?
you guys support it technically.
For sure. For sure. Benny and these guys will speak to that. Benny, the founder of Tap, like he I guess is I don't know how you guys would describe him, but yourselves guys, but he's someone that you would come to and bounce ideas off like all the time with the kind of things you're thinking. Will and Iman, essentially, like in my opinion, there's not many people who'll be putting the protocol to work as much as these guys. Like they really are like testing out like all these things and productizing things and saying, well, this is possible and this is possible. And again, but there was a question that I'm getting away from and I want to answer it. What was the actual question?
So this could go to you, Iman or Will. The reason why I introduced that way is that, I'm exploring the relationship between Tap and, DMT theory, but then also speculating or wondering, what type of features between this collaborative effort, is to come in the future as DMT expands, technically.
They should take that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question because, it seems like, we're sort of collaborating with Benny on like this whole design, but really it's been organic. When we showed Benny the DMT Git book in the early days, he was like, this is cool. No, even us, we didn't understand like, what we had here, like what it really was. And the same thing with Benny. He was like, this is pretty cool. If it gets a lot of traction, I'll support it. And, as soon as they blocked out in 7 days, it's like, yeah, this is a pretty big deal. Right. And so it's been like that, this entire year. We come up with like, hey, Benny, we have creators who want to, want to get supported. Is there a way that we can develop, privilege authority and all these like different features such as like redirecting it to the miners, things like that, to kind of like solve some of these problems. And so Benny's been instrumental in all of this, but I just want to iterate that it's been more organic rather than like designed. And so I don't know if that really answers your question, but there's still a lot more to build. And so the way that we know what's next is through, I guess, talking about it, people asking questions about it. It's like a creator specifically asking for specific features. And then that's how we kind of build out this whole thing. And like right now we're building Bitmap OS, which is an operating system that goes on top of a bitmap. So you can create, communities in 3D. And so there's a whole lot that goes into all this stuff, but ultimately it's all organic.
Yeah, so there it is. Bitmap OS. That's kind of what I was leading you towards. We'll go to Fitzy just because he works at Tap and may have some insight to this, and then we'll go to Dogfather right after.
But one sec, guys. I actually have to run. I have a meeting at the moment. I just want to thank you guys for having me on, and I appreciate what you guys do. We watch you all the time, and I'm sorry, but I have to jump.
You're all good, bro. No worries.
Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate you.
See you later, mate. Yeah, I think I was just a quick one, just on what you were saying there. He mentioned this is organic. I mean, I came into the Tap team 6 months ago, right? So I'd heard of DMT. I understood the basics. I definitely didn't get it, as you're hearing someone that's been orange pilled, DMT pilled heavily here, right? Overdosed, you could argue. But I observed when I came into the space what Block Runner do is Will and Iman sit there and they kind of have these really sort of theoretical, they just theorize around random things that might be possible. And then what often happens is a few months later, I'll get a message from Benny saying, oh, there's this thing we're developing as a result of a conversation that I had with, just as with DMT, just as I described the theory, like, Benny was like, okay, cool. so I hear, and then eventually went, oh no, wait a minute, I've really thought about this, and started, you know, trying to poke holes in it. And I think that's gonna be how this goes. Like, there'll be somebody who has never even spoken to Benny, to Will, to Iman, to any of the team, and maybe hasn't even interacted within the Bitcoin ecosystem, but right, because there's this heavy scientific layer that underscores this, that you're mapping these digital things over this kind of like already existing framework that we have mentally with physical items. I could just see some kind of like, I don't know, particle physicist or somebody go, whoa, 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 and just completely come and from left field said, this thing is possible. Did you realize it? So it's, and these guys say it themselves. Will and Iman, again, way too humble. Like they don't claim now that since the theory has been released that they own it. They just say they want people to come and say, maybe what about this? What about that? They love that kind of deep conversation. So anything that comes out of the DMT space will be, in that case, organic. There's no way that one person is just going to kind of like say, and then this, and like, you know, like roadmap it. I just don't think that's going to be possible. I think it is way more organic. And the final point, just to really underscore this point that they were talking about, which again, being way too humble, the ability that they've now going to bring into the TAP protocol to adjust so anybody can select, they can opt in to have their token driven to the miners. So we're talking about a multi-subsidy chain that has up until this point, i.e. Bitcoin, been a single subsidy model. So only Bitcoin was produced organically at the point of a block confirming. NAT token will be the first one to demonstrate it from a DMT perspective, but there is no way it will be the last. And every single time you drive more income to the miners, you literally make Bitcoin stronger, safer, more decentralized. And if we talk about missions, mission coins, the Murad stuff, I don't think there's a bigger mission. So more people will be doing that. And that's literally going to make Bitcoin safer. And that's an incredible thing to say as one single use case for one single field, of which there are 39 in one particular token. So this is where I'm saying, and I'm going to stop, but it doesn't end. And once you understand it, once you watch the video, once you kind of really start thinking about it, especially if you like to go down rabbit holes, which I think we all do, it kind of does take over your mind and your soul, to be honest.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I'm going to go to the hands now. Go to Dogfather, Matt, and then Joe right after.
Yo, GM, I love the discussion about DMT. I'm super honest. I didn't get it at first. I thought, okay, this is too nerdy even for me. But the more you look at it, the cooler it is. And I think everyone, like in particular Adam and Jake, who know all these historical NFTs, know that there was a collection on ETH called Crypto Arte that's kind of like taking all kind of block characteristics and showing it into a very appealing way that you can really want to hang at your wall. And of course, everyone knows art blocks, which is like the ringers and, the autoglyphs and the like, that are like really high art pieces. I would love to have, besides the PFP projects, I would love to have a DMT art project that has very pleasant, like, outcomes that people really want to print and consider as high art. But that would be really cool. The only obstacle I see a bit is like in terms of branding. I mean, DMT is just like a very nerdy name. Art blocks, I think the branding was like more appropriate to collectors. So maybe someone comes out with some cool idea and is employing DMT, but has, let's say, an easier brand for collectors, and probably there are some artists out there already working on that. I'm just not aware of it, but I'm really much looking forward to explore that even further, because Gen Art and Bitcoin, I mean, that's just a perfect fit.
DMT fine art, man. What a great idea. Yeah, Crypto Arte is actually really popular within the historical NFT community. Just non-random generative art, I suppose, right? That's pretty underexplored. It's really good idea. We'll go to Matt and then Joe.
Hey, thanks for having me up here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
We got you.
Cool. Yeah, I came up a while ago. I just wasn't sure when to jump in here, but appreciate all the conversations, especially as someone who's jumped in as a creator within DMT. Definitely feel for the talk about the costs of generative art. For example, like my collection sold so far around like a bit over 100 pieces, and I didn't have to pre-inscribe a 10K collection just to be able to sell about 100 of them so far. So definitely saved a large sum of money by going down that route. And then another thing I guess I wanted to mention, just talking about like the marketing and like the narrative of DMT. I guess I was thinking about how comparing the NAT token to fiat currencies, and the NAT tokens potentially becoming some sort of like metaverse currency, going like further down that rabbit hole a little bit. Fiat is like a government issued currency, and then NATs, bitmaps, these other tokens that follow the DMT protocol, I've kind of come to call like a Bitcoin issued token or Bitcoin issued currency. So I think that might be a potential way to explain it in a bit more like easy to understand way, and also like very literal, like it is really Bitcoin that is issuing these tokens once the supply pattern occurs, right? So just wanted to ramble a little bit there, but yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, I really appreciate it. It's there's so many aspects to this protocol, and everyone sees it in a different way, which is really fascinating. What's up, Joe?
Hi, boys. How's it going?
Long time no talk. Are you running right now?
I know, right? I'm actually outside right now, so I know, Jake. It's been a minute. I was actually thinking when the last time we spoke, and it's been a minute. What's up, Adam, and everybody else who's on stage? Obviously, you guys know, if you've been following my timeline, this is the most interesting conversation being had in all of crypto from my standpoint. And there's so many takes I have just based on what we've been discussing here. But so someone please keep me on track, because I can go off on tangents. But before I even say anything, I just want to say how amazing it is to have some of my favorite people in this space on stage. So I just want to throw that out there. I think where I want to, I guess, throw out some thoughts is I'm bullish any protocol that forces you to learn more about Bitcoin. And I think that's kind of like outside of like the Rare Pepe community, because I first discovered Ordinals through Joe Looney and Adam, kind of and Skrilla, kind of just having these conversations back and forth on the timeline. I love going down rabbit holes, so like start to investigate. And then I stumbled across Casey's YouTube video where he really like got nerdy and technical on what Ordinals was about. And in my opinion, I feel like DMT like takes it one step further, because a lot of people, and this conversation was had earlier, I think Adam, you were speaking on it. There's just a lot of like uneducated. I don't mean this in a derogatory way. There's just a lot of uneducated people who are like loud on the microphones, but really don't understand what's going on, and don't understand like we're all wearing lenses when it comes to these certain protocols to interpret Bitcoin data, right? And so when you think about DMT and the fact that this data that we're pulling these patterns from actually do exist on chain, like that becomes even more interesting to me. So I do share the same sentiments as far as like I keep referencing Adam because him and we met in Nashville and we're kind of going back and forth on this conversation. But I do understand like it does get pretty technical and nerdy. But I mean, honestly, so was Ordinals, like that's kind of what I think about all the time. Like it took me a minute. I watched Casey's video like 50 times trying to understand what the hell he was talking about. And then on the side note, like the whole non-arbitrary, I didn't know what the hell that meant either. But once I understood it, like I felt like I was super giga brain and started using it. But I do understand a lot of people in the market don't understand exactly what that is. But I feel like just like the Apple phone, right? Like if the product is solid, which I think DMT is super solid, I feel like the narratives and the marketing will come, because you have active devs and active community, right? And so like I feel like it's just one of those things that's just like brick by brick, but eventually people will come around to find out that this is actually something very valuable to Bitcoin. So just wanted to chime in there and throw those thoughts out there.
Yeah, man, appreciate your take, and it's great to catch up with you. It had been a minute. Chris, I was wondering if you had any questions or any thoughts on the conversation. The conversation's been great over the last hour or so.
Yeah, man. I mean, I love it. I always love chatting about DMT and everything like that. It's always a brain buster. You know, it's something that we know feels extremely kind of important or interesting, and we really love to poke at it. But then it's also extremely confusing. Like, what is the best use case for this? How is it going to be presented? So it's always kind of a brain buster for me. That's why I kind of like bringing it back to these kind of first principles, DMT for dummies. Let's break it down to its base layers and really kind of hash it out. But it's always exciting to chat about it. It feels like kind of, you can see some of the final scenes of a movie at the beginning, and you're trying to figure out the storyline as you're watching it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I kind of like that too. It's like this idea that DMT almost ran the ordinals playbook with, fungibles and some ordinals and that sort of thing. But then I can't remember who said it, but that there's also this other opportunity and more opportunities around just the infrastructure of DMT, where, maybe it's, data for agents, or maybe it's this or that, right? Which allow this kind of like experimentation from the core community. I think is pretty interesting.
yeah.
What's up, Fitz?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Just it's a question I've never really asked Will or Iman this, and I know Iman's still here. I think, like, Iman, when we've had these conversations sometimes in our weekly space on a Friday with the Tap account, we've spoken about some of the specific use cases, right? So the bits field being okay, that can leverage that property of security. So when it gets more secure, it can make the token be less inflated, right? So that's a cool dynamic. But that's only one. The nonce field, for example, has random numbers. So that's the field of data in each block that's associated with trying to get the block. The miners are trying to kind of like crack the code and guess this magical number, right? So that's like truly randomized numbers created by Bitcoin. And just I believe, probably from Will and Iman, their podcast, that like the actual the ability to generate randomization, like actual real randomization in the world, is very, very scarce, right? And so that's just a cool property of Bitcoin. But one of the products that I thought you could create, that you definitely could create now that the nonce field has been indexed, is like a Bitcoin lottery, right? So when you have actual randomness, you could have a Bitcoin lottery. Someone could create a site, and you put X amount of Bitcoin in. Maybe it's pegged to when for example, stable coins come onto Tap in a few weeks. Like, you could use USDT, so it's like a fixed dollar price, to enter this lottery, and it randomly selects a winner because it's got actual randomization. And so the question to Iman is, maybe we should think, as a few of us or anybody else in the audience, this is a question to everybody, maybe we should all start thinking about trying to get as many possible use cases for the specific data fields and what those properties would actually be, and how that could be leveraged, and what that could do in terms of a cool way to generate a token. Because this talk is educational, and this never moves the ball fast, right? It needs to be a cool concept that's packaged in a way that you go, I get it, that is cool, oh wow, that's powerful. And so I guess it's like a call to arms that we should all be thinking about. What other ways could these 39 data fields be leveraged to do cool stuff, right? And then if one person figures out how to do it, they can build a product behind that. And then you're going to have actual product builders. And this is not going to happen overnight. But the problem right now is that tipping point of understanding. But when you break it down to the fact that your assets can inherit or be triggered by a particular property of the very chain that you're building them on, that's kind of it. Like, that's the message. So more use cases, more specific examples, that will be able to kind of, whet the appetite of the market, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is like the underlying like task for everybody who's like engaged and interested in DMT, is to discover. So I guess based on the current limitations of 3 fields, yeah, there are already killer applications or use cases we can take advantage of. And then the added benefit of leveraging, Tap protocols, smart contract capabilities, kind of marry these two unlocks together. It's definitely something we're focused on delivering, because we know every new framework or standard needs its crypto kitties moment, right? You can create the ERC 721. Before that was formalized, people were trying to experiment with this non-fungibility aspect. But it wasn't until there was a little bit more structure to that, and again, a killer demonstration, a showcase of what you can do with this as an actual, essentially a non-fungible game ecosystem you could build from it. That's when it started to click, right? And we manias typically ensue after that. So for sure, that's kind of where we are. There's enough infrastructure in place with TAP and the existing state of DMT where a killer new narrative can emerge. And that's definitely what we're trying to do as well.
Chris, did you have any final comments? Sorry, I cut you off there earlier.
Oh, you're all good. I guess I would just kind of go off of what Fitzy was saying. It's really hard to actually determine with high confidence, consistent randomness. You could go back to a book by Nassim Taleb, Fooled by Randomness. A lot of these random events throughout the entire universe aren't necessarily at least repeatable randomness. And so when you find data within the Bitcoin blockchain that can be consistently with high confidence as complete randomness, it's actually a pretty big breakthrough. And so it'll just be interesting to kind of see how that kind of progresses throughout.
That's why we play the game. Iman, I'd love to give you, any final comments or last words before we do wrap it up here.
Yeah. So we're, as we're all aware, tomorrow is the official 1 year anniversary, essentially whenever the Git book was published and the NAT token was deployed and such. But so the goal of today, which is why Will's over there scrambling, is to get our in metaverse event to kind of commemorate and celebrate this fully functional by tomorrow. But there's a lot of different variables. I think we're on track, I'm pretty sure. And we're trying to piece together as much of a killer showcase, right? Because we didn't get much time to talk about things like the Natrix and the context of how DMT applies to the bitmap ecosystem, how everything is actually a cohesive infrastructure to not just add new additional economic components to what bitmap already is to facilitate the production of an actual commodities layer, right? And so that's going to take more experimentation, kind of what we've been talking about. But it was originally the inception of DMT in the first place, right? Why DMT needed to exist is to have the issuance of assets that share the same properties of a bitmap, right? The non-arbitrary elements of that. The fact that, not just land can be generated through Bitcoin data, but essentially anything can. Fungible to non-fungible, the whole spectrum is covered, right? So that is the original purpose. So we'll be showcasing basically what's been done over the last year within this experience, this scene, and also we're trying to demonstrate upgrades that we're going to be bringing to the Natrix ecosystem at the same time, which is essentially an Unreal environment that at some point everybody who owns a bitmap will have access to these tools to essentially construct their own 3D ecosystems, onboard their own communities, and actually parcelize their bitmaps and actually utilize a bitmap the way it should be done, right? So all this hopefully is targeted. We don't have a specific date or time yet, but I guess keep your eyes on the timeline. We'll be blasting it as soon as the information's there.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm excited to see the development of DMT. For everyone who enjoyed the conversation, please give the Emblem Vault account a follow. We host a show Tuesday through Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We have all of these awesome conversations, as well as give updates on the Emblem Vault ecosystem, which there's a lot to come in December and next year. Tomorrow, we're going to be back with the Gandhi team, which is a premier lending platform on ETH. They just added support for Rare Pepe. So they would love to explain, their reasoning, what is the opportunity over there, and the world of cross-chain lending. And then on Thursday, I think we may have a very special show. Also, make sure you give Iman a follow so that you can stay in touch with everything that's happening in DMT land, as well as all of the other awesome speakers who've been here on stage. Iman, appreciate you for coming on again. Happy 1 year anniversary, and appreciate everyone who joined us. during this conversation or sat there and listened. You are all very appreciated. And now just make sure you guys have a fun time today. We'll be back here tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. Until then, enjoy the space and get ready for a crazy 2025.